What is this?
Oh my God.
This is it. Ah.
The girl suddenly stood up, in a split second, before anyone could even process what was happening. She tilted her head and spat directly into the face of the older woman sitting across from her. A small sound, but sharp like a blade. The entire room froze. A spoon clattered onto a plate. A man stood motionless, his eyes wide so wide it seemed he no longer recognized the woman he loved. No one spoke. No one could believe that in what was supposed to be a perfect family introduction dinner, in the heart of Lagos, something so cruel, so inhuman, could happen. But the girl didn't flinch. She calmly wiped her lips and sat back down, as if nothing had happened. And it was that calmness that made everyone begin to feel uneasy. Because there are people who just do evil in a moment. They truly believe they will never have to pay the price. But life has never worked that way. Just 24 hours later, everything will be turned upside down. Her reputation, her future, everything she tried to build, will collapse in a way no one in that room could have imagined. And the woman she just humiliated is not an ordinary person. If you're rewatching this video, tell me where you're rewatching from. Leave a comment below. And if you believe the way you treat others today is exactly how life will treat you tomorrow, then don't forget to subscribe. Because this story is not just a shock, it's a warning. Stay until the end. Because what you're about to hear will make you rethink how you treat the people closest to you. The afternoon in Lagos settled slowly, like a layer of amber honey draped over tin roofs, faded fences, and trees standing still in the lingering heat of the day. The road leading into Adewale's mother's home was not wide, not flashy, no electronic gates, no uniformed security, no tinted glass hiding the life inside like the luxury villas Chioma was used to. Here, there was only a quiet simplicity, a house that had lived through years. Potted plants lined the front. Scratches marked the doorstep. Every small detail carried the trace of a life that had truly been lived. Adewale slowed the car as they turned into the yard. He didn't say much, but something in his face had already changed along the drive. Less sharp, less guarded, as if just being near this house softened him, turning the composed, unreadable man back into an ordinary son. A quieter, gentler part of him surfaced, subtle but unmistakable to anyone paying attention. Chioma noticed, and she didn't like it. From the passenger seat, she removed her sunglasses, letting her gaze drift slowly across the low gate, the faded walls, and the neat but modest yard, so simple it offered nothing worth showing off to the world. Everything was clean, orderly, proper, but to her, it had no value, no shine of wealth, no signal of status, nothing that suggested she was stepping closer to the life of luxury she had always pursued. She smiled, a perfectly practiced smile, beautiful, soft, timed just right, but cold. It sat on her lips like jewelry, polished, flawless, and completely lifeless. "Is this the house you grew up in?" she asked lightly, as if it were just casual curiosity. "Yeah," Adewale replied, eyes still on the house. "My mom likes it here. I've told her many times to move somewhere better, but she doesn't want to." Chioma let out a quiet "oh." Just a simple sound, yet filled with judgment she didn't need to voice. The door opened before they even reached the steps. His mother stood there. She wore no silk, no luxury, nothing that suggested she lived off her son's success. Just a simple, neat outfit, faded in color, but perfectly clean. Her gray hair was tied back. Her face carried the lines of time, but her eyes shone with a gentle warmth, the kind only found in people who have endured hardship without letting bitterness take root. "Adewale," she called, her voice trembling slightly, not from surprise, but from joy. Then her eyes turned to Chioma. In that moment, her smile widened with a sincerity so pure it could make anyone feel uneasy. "You must be Chioma. Come in, come in. I've been waiting for you both since this afternoon." Not you. No polite distance. Just a simple, heartfelt welcome, as if she were opening her home to someone. who had always belonged there. Chioma stepped out of the car slowly, careful not to let her heels touch the dust. She tilted her head slightly, offering a sweet, flawless smile. "I'm very happy to meet you," she said. The words were perfect, the tone impeccable. Only one thing was missing: warmth. The mother didn't seem to notice. Or perhaps she did, but for the sake of her son, she chose to open her heart anyway. The table had been prepared long before they arrived. No scented candles, no imported cutlery, no crystal glasses reflecting golden light like the restaurants Chioma frequented. On the old wooden table were dishes she had cooked herself, pepper soup steaming with aroma, white rice, stewed fish, sautéed vegetables, and fresh juice poured into a simple glass pitcher. Everything was arranged carefully, not out of formality, but out of love. Chioma saw it immediately, and because she saw it so clearly, she despised it even more. To her, refinement only mattered when it came wrapped in wealth. Care only mattered when it was expensive. Here, no matter how much effort the older woman had put in, it was still, in Chioma's eyes, just the neatness of a small, outdated, limited world. A world beneath her ambitions. Adwell pulled out her chair, a natural gesture of courtesy. His mother noticed and smiled softly. In that smile was relief, the quiet peace of a woman who had raised her son alone and now only wished to see him build a good life with someone sincere by his side. She served Chioma first. "I don't know your taste," she said gently. "A little shy, so I made some simple dishes. If you don't like anything, just tell me." Chioma looked at the piece of fish in her bowl as if it were a test. She had no intention of passing. Then she smiled. "You were very thoughtful." Once again perfect words. But her eyes were as cold as glass. The meal began with light conversation. The mother asked about Chioma's work, her family, whether Legos tired her, simple questions from someone who genuinely wanted to know the person sitting across from her. She didn't ask about salary. Didn't ask about connections. Didn't ask what benefit Chioma could bring to her son. She only asked with kindness. But Chioma wasn't listening with her heart. She was listening with calculation. Every glance around the house, every wall, every worn but clean piece of furniture, every ceiling fan, every mismatched dish entered her mind as silent evidence. Evidence that this woman did not belong to the world Chioma wanted. That Adwell's roots were far from the polished image he carried outside. That behind his composure was a background too ordinary, too modest, too easy to be looked down on if exposed to the wrong crowd. And that irritated her deeply. Because Chioma did not love simplicity. She only used it when necessary. She didn't hate the poor because they were ugly. She hated them because they reminded her that the world is divided. And she had fought too hard to climb higher. She would not allow anything to pull her back down. The mother knew none of this. She kept serving her son, reminding him to eat slowly, smiling quietly, happy just to see him come home earlier than usual. Her love filled the room so naturally that the air itself seemed warmer because of her presence. And that warmth made Chioma feel even more out of place. Because some people walk into a humble home and feel warmth. Others walk into the same place and only see market value. Chioma was the second kind. She lifted her glass, took a small sip, and glanced around the room again. The look was quick, subtle, easy to miss. But if anyone had looked closely, they would have seen it. No gratitude, only measurement, comparison, judgment, and a quiet seed of contempt growing beneath her flawless smile and velvet voice. Adwell hadn't seen it yet. He only saw his mother happy, his girlfriend polite, the evening unfolding exactly as he had hoped. He didn't know that right at this table, under this gentle yellow light, surrounded by food made with sincere love, something very cold was quietly forming. On the surface, everything looked perfect. A successful man, bringing the woman he loved to meet his mother. A modest home welcoming them with a warm meal. Polite words exchanged as if everything were moving in the right direction. But that was only the surface. Because beneath it, each person in that room carried a different truth. The mother carried hope, Adwale carried trust, and Chioma, she carried a smile so beautiful it felt chilling, and a gaze that had already decided this place was nothing more than ordinary. The air inside the small house in Lagos still held onto the fragile warmth of a first family dinner, warmth not created by expensive furniture or elegant lighting, but by the sincerity of a mother who had spent the entire afternoon cooking, cleaning, adjusting every chair, every bowl, just to give her son a peaceful evening. Outside, the wind gently stirred the leaves by the porch. Inside, the soft clink of a spoon against a bowl, the steady hum of the ceiling fan, the faint sound of water shifting inside a glass pitcher as Adwale reached to pour another drink. Everything seemed fine. Everything felt like it only needed a few more polite exchanges before the evening would pass, as smoothly as countless first meetings before it. Until the mother set her spoon down. She didn't do it abruptly. She didn't try to draw attention. There was no sternness of someone about to lecture. She simply straightened her back slightly, her aging hands tightening gently against the edge of the table, as if choosing her words carefully, so as not to hurt anyone. Her eyes turned to Chioma, still gentle, still calm. "Here," she said slowly, like someone who had lived long enough to understand that the weight of words lies in their calmness, not their volume. "We value respect above everything else." It should have been a normal sentence. The kind elders say in many homes, a soft reminder, a guiding principle, a value carried through generations. But in that moment, it landed on Chioma like a spark hitting something already burning beneath the surface. She lifted her head. Just seconds ago, she had still worn that polite, flawless expression, the one of a woman who knew how to behave in front of her partner as family. Now, the smile on her lips changed. It didn't disappear. It twisted, just enough to reveal the coldness underneath. Then she laughed, a short sound, dry, cold, not a trace of joy in it. It sounded less like laughter and more like something made of glass cracking. The mother paused. Adwale looked up. The entire room seemed to shrink around that sound. "Respect," Chioma repeated, tilting her head slightly, her voice soft but sharp like a thin blade. "Respect." She looked around the house, no longer hiding it. Her gaze moved slowly across the faded walls, the worn cabinet, the polished but simple wooden furniture, the modest dishes still steaming on the table. Then back to the mother. In this house, no one moved. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Adwale set his glass down, very slowly, very gently, but even that small sound echoed loudly in the sudden silence, as if the room had become so tense that anything could trigger an alarm. His expression changed. No longer the softened look of a son returning home. No longer the patience of a man trying to keep the evening peaceful. Something in his eyes darkened. Not immediate anger, but the shock of someone hearing the first crack run through a picture he had believed was whole. "Chioma," he said. Just one word. Not loud, but deep enough to carry a warning. She turned to him, and in that moment, Adwale realized something that sent a chill down his spine. The woman in front of him did think she had crossed a line. If anything, she looked relieved. Relieved she no longer had to pretend. She exhaled softly, as if she had been holding it in for too long. "Did I say something wrong?" she asked, calmly, cruelly calm. "You talk about respect like it's something people automatically deserve. But I'm sorry, respect doesn't just exist because someone is older." The mother stayed silent. She didn't interrupt, didn't react. She only looked at Chioma quietly, painfully, like she was searching beneath the makeup, the beauty, the sharpness, to see if there was still any humanity left. But Chioma had already gone too far. "If someone wants respect," she continued, lifting her napkin from her lap and placing it on the table with slow, controlled precision, "then at the very least, they should live in a place that makes others see their worth." Under the table, the mother's fingers tightened together. Adwale saw it. He also saw her shoulders sink just slightly, but enough to send a sharp pain through his chest. The kind of pain only a child feels when realizing the mother who endured so much in life is now being humiliated in her own home. That's enough. His voice dropped lower. This was no longer a warning. It was a boundary. But Chioma did stop. Some people, when they realize they've gone too far, step back. Others, once the mask falls, feel a strange satisfaction in destroying whatever limits remain. Chioma was the second kind. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, her eyes openly filled with the contempt she had hidden so well before. "You want me to stay quiet to keep things polite?" she asked, looking directly at Adwale. "Or do you want me to sit here and pretend none of this is embarrassing?" "Chioma, no, let me finish." Her voice snapped like a whip. "I've been polite since I walked in. But honestly, I don't understand why you think this is such an important meeting. I came here, I sat in this house, I ate this dinner. I listened to lessons about respect, and all I see is—" She paused, not out of hesitation, but to choose the most painful words possible. "Just mediocrity wrapped in pride." The sentence fell onto the table like a hammer. The mother closed her eyes for a second. Just 1 second. But when she opened them again, the joy of a woman who had waited all afternoon for her son was gone. In its place was a deep, old, heavy sadness, the sadness of someone who had lived with kindness her entire life, yet still found herself being crushed for not being wealthy. Adwale felt his hands turn cold. All evening, he had tried to stay calm, tried to believe this was just discomfort, tried to believe she was nervous, that she didn't mean it, tried to hold on to the image of the intelligent, graceful woman he thought he knew. But every word she spoke now was destroying that image piece by piece. He looked at her for a long time, as if staring at a stranger wearing the face of someone he once loved. "My mother invited you here," he said slowly, each word heavier than the last, "not for you to evaluate the value of this house. She invited you because she respects you." Chioma let out a faint, dismissive laugh. "Someone who truly has value, doesn't he need to keep talking about respect?" This time the mother spoke, not loudly, not trembling, not pleading. "Child," she said, her voice sad but steady, "I am not rich. That is true. I do not live a glamorous life. That is also true. But a small home does not make a person small. What makes a person small is how they treat kindness." Something flickered in Chioma's eyes. Not regret, wounded pride. And when the pride of someone arrogant is struck, that is when they become the most dangerous. She pushed her chair back. The harsh scrape against the floor tore through what little restraint remained in the room. Adwale looked up immediately. His mother fell silent. Chioma stood, not fast, not chaotic, slow, straight, elegant. Like a queen adjusting her dress before stepping past people she considers beneath her. That calmness was what made it terrifying. Because, sometimes, the most frightening thing isn't explosive anger, but contempt so deep it no longer needs to shout. Chioma looked down at the older woman in front of her. From above, her gaze held nothing back, only pure coldness. Adwale stood up too, instinct tightening in his chest. "Chioma," he said, his voice now different, low, tense, dangerous. "Sit down." But she didn't look at him. She only looked at the woman who just minutes ago had been serving her food with trembling hands, hoping to welcome her with kindness. Then Chioma smiled. A small smile. Beautiful. Cruel. And in that smile, everyone in the room felt it. A line had just been crossed. The dinner was over. What would happen next would no longer be discomfort. No longer careless words. No longer a clash between generations or lifestyles. It would be humiliation. Raw. Irreversible. And no one in that house, not even Adwale, could stop things from spiraling beyond repair. Then it happened. So fast that no one in the room could believe what they had just seen. No warning. No hesitation. No loud explosion the way people imagine before a tragedy unfolds. Just one brief movement from Chioma's face, her lips tightening slightly, her chin lifting a little, her icy eyes fixed on the older woman sitting in front of her. And then, She spat directly into the woman's face. The sound was small, dry, but in that moment, it struck the room like a silent blast, tearing through every layer of politeness, every mask, every final illusion anyone still had about that evening. Time seemed to stop. No one moved. No one breathed. The ceiling fan kept turning, but the air beneath it felt frozen solid. The warm yellow light still fell across the table. The dishes, the water pitcher, the food. No one had finished eating, but now everything looked strange, like an abandoned stage, in the exact moment tragedy had landed. Adwale stood completely still, not the stillness of a man about to explode in anger, but the total immobility of someone who had just witnessed something so wrong, so vile, so far beyond repair that even rage arrived a second too late. He looked at the woman in front of him. Or rather, he looked at the face that only a few hours earlier he had still believed was beautiful, intelligent, sharp enough to walk beside him into the future. But now, all that remained on that face was something terrifyingly cold. No panic, no regret, not even the slightest sign that she realized she had gone too far. Chioma simply stood there, straight-backed, beautiful, cruel, as if what she had just done, in her mind, was not a disgusting act of humiliation, but a judgment she believed she had every right to deliver. His mother remained seated. She did not scream. She did not burst into tears. She did not cover her face. She did not leap to her feet demanding back her dignity, the way almost anyone else might have. It was her silence that made the scene even more horrifying. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. Then very slowly, the older woman reached for the small cloth napkin beside her bowl. Her hands did not tremble as much as Adwale expected. She unfolded it, wiped her face, slowly, calmly, as if what she was wiping away was not only spit from her skin, but the last illusion she had held onto about the young woman standing before her. Every movement was so composed that the room became even quieter, not because she was weak, and not because she was used to humiliation, but because there are certain depths of pain where people stop reacting with sound. They simply fall silent, silent enough to frighten everyone else. When she was done, she folded the cloth neatly again, set it back on the table, then looked up. Her eyes met Chioma's directly. No pleading, no wild hatred, no fire. Only something deeper, something so still, so profound in its disappointment. It almost felt like fate taking shape. "You will understand," she said. Her voice was a little rougher now, but still clear, still steady, each word falling like the last drops before a much greater storm. Very soon, Chioma blinked. Maybe in some tiny corner of that moment, she had expected a different reaction. Tears, a curse, a slap, chaos, something that would let her remain above it all, still able to sneer. But the mother gave her none of that. She only looked at her with the eyes of someone who had seen exactly what she was. And sometimes, being truly seen is more frightening than being fought. Adwale still said nothing. The room no longer felt like a family dinner. It felt like something between a courtroom and a funeral, a place where something had just died, and everyone left standing knew it would never come back. He looked at his mother. The dampness still visible on her aged skin under the light made his chest tighten like a fist. This was the woman who had stayed awake through endless nights for him, who had lived through years of poverty with a bent back, rough hands, and a youth worn away without ever demanding fairness from life. The woman who had gone hungry so he could go to school, gone without nice clothes so he could have decent ones, gone without restful sleep so he could have a wider tomorrow. And right here, inside the small house she had preserved with all the dignity she had left, a woman he had brought home, a woman he once believed could be his future, had just spat directly in his mother's face. Not in panic, not in loss of control, but in full awareness. That realization came to Adwale slowly and cruelly. It did not erupt into instant fury. It sank into him like a blade driven deep, cold and certain, until everything inside him changed shape. Chioma turned to look at him. Maybe only then did she expect him to speak, to rage, to defend his mother, to shout at her, to give her the confrontation she could still try to win with her sharpness. But what she received was not fury. It was Adwell's gaze. He looked at her, as if for the first time he was seeing who she really was. There was no love left in it, no fascination, not even the effort to understand, to forgive, to find excuses for the cruel things she had said earlier. Every bridge between them, if any had ever truly existed, had collapsed the instant that spit touched his mother's face. It was the kind of silence, more terrifying than a scream, because when a man like Adwell shouts, it means some part of him still wants to save something. Some part of him is still struggling with old love, disappointment, shock. But when he goes silent like this, it means he has moved beyond anger. He has seen the end. Chioma frowned slightly. For the first time that evening, a tiny crack appeared in her confidence. "Why are you looking at me like that?" she asked, her voice still trying to stay cold, but no longer as steady as before. Adwell did not answer. That alone made her question fall into the room, like something empty and pointless. He took one step toward his mother. Slow, clear. That small movement said more than any speech ever could. No one needed a declaration to understand that in this moment, Chioma's place in that house, in his heart, in the future he had once imagined had changed forever. His mother did not turn to look at her son right away. She kept looking at Chioma, calm in a way that felt almost unreal, like someone standing at the edge of a cliff after the dizziness has passed, left only with painful clarity. "Poverty," she said, quieter now but sharper, "is not as shameful as an empty soul." Chioma let out a dry little laugh, as if trying to seize control again. "You think a few moral lessons are supposed to scare me?" The mother shook her head very slightly. "No," she said. "I do not need to frighten you. Life is far better at that than I am." The sentence was not loud, not threatening, not dramatic, but it fell into the room like a warning bell. This time, even Chioma did not answer right away. A sudden breeze slipped through the half-closed window, making the thin curtain stir. The smell of the food on the table now felt heavy, almost sickening. The meal prepared with love was completely dead. All that remained was its body, the bowls, the chairs, the table, the light, the food growing cold, lying there as proof that sometimes one single act is enough to kill every trace of kindness in a room. Adwell bent slightly toward his mother, not to ask if she was all right because that question was too small for the humiliation she had just endured, but simply to stand closer, as a belated way of saying that from this moment on, he was awake. Then he looked back at Chioma. That was no longer the look of a man seeing the woman he loved. It was the look of a man facing the cruelest truth about his own choice. And that truth was this: he had brought a devil into his mother's house with his own hands. Chioma understood. At last, she understood. Not from the mother's words, not from the silence in the room, but from Adwell's eyes. She had won the moment of humiliation, but she had just lost something much greater. She had revealed her true nature in the one place it could not be hidden, at the one moment it could not be taken back, in front of the one man she still needed to keep deceiving. And the most terrifying part was, no one in that room doubted it anymore. Outside, Legos had gone fully dark. Inside the small house, the yellow light still burned, but the warmth was gone. Only 3 people remained standing among the ruins of a completely shattered family dinner. A mother who had been humiliated yet held on to her dignity until the very end. A man who had just seen the true face of the woman he loved, and a beautiful young woman standing in the middle of the room with flawless lipstick, but for the first time unable to hide the rot inside her soul. In that moment, no one said another word, because all of them understood. There are certain acts that, once committed, can no longer be called mistakes. They become a sentence. And Chioma's sentence began the very moment she spat in a mother's face. The next morning, Legos woke up in a rhythm, completely different from the night before. No heaviness, no suffocating atmosphere from a shattered dinner, only the rushing flow of traffic, blaring horns, and sharply dressed people moving quickly toward towering glass buildings, reflecting the early sunlight. Chioma stood in front of one of those buildings, one of the biggest companies in Lagos, the kind of place where stepping inside as an official employee could change the direction of a person's life forever. She looked up. The massive glass reflected her image back at her, a beautiful, sharp, confident woman, flawless down to the smallest detail. No one looking at that reflection would have guessed that just 24 hours earlier, she had done something that, if it ever got out, could destroy everything. But Chioma wasn't thinking about that. No regret, no fear, not at all. Because in her mind, what had happened the night before was just an outburst. A small mistake she believed she could manage. Adwale would calm down eventually. A man like him would not throw away a woman like her over one dinner. And that older woman, no matter how hurt she was still just an elderly woman living in a small house, with no power great enough to affect Chioma's future. She had done the math, and in her calculation, everything was still under control. Chioma took a deep breath, adjusted her collar, smoothed her hair. A perfect smile appeared on her lips again, the same one that always appeared whenever she entered a place where value was measured by first impressions. Today was the final interview, the dream job, the chance to change her life. She walked in. The lobby was wide, bright, cold, and perfect in exactly the way Chioma loved. Polished stone floors, a glass reception desk, stylish people speaking softly, moving quickly and precisely like gears inside a giant machine. There was no trace of anything provincial, no smell of homemade food, no uncomfortable warmth like the kind she had been forced to endure the night before. There was only professionalism, control, and opportunity. Chioma felt like she belonged here. She approached the reception desk, her voice gentle, confident, almost charming. "I have a 9 o'clock interview." Her name was checked. A polite smile was returned. "Conference room, 12th floor. The panel is already waiting." The panel was already waiting. Chioma gave the faintest smile. That was exactly the position she wanted, to be the person others were waiting for. She stepped into the elevator. The doors closed. For a moment, in that narrow metallic space, it was only her and her reflection in the polished walls. She looked at herself. She saw no fault, no error, only a woman walking exactly along the path she had planned. The elevator stopped. 12th floor. The doors opened. A long, quiet hallway stretched ahead, carpeted thick enough to swallow every footstep. This floor felt completely different from the ones below, more private, more powerful, as if the most important decisions were made behind these closed doors. An assistant was already waiting. "Ms. Chioma, right this way." The conference room door opened, and her world stopped, not metaphorically, not as a feeling, but as a real, sudden, violent stop, cold and sharp, as if someone had slammed an emergency brake inside her mind. Inside was a long conference table. Men and women in crisp clothing, sharp eyes, files arranged neatly in front of them. And at the head of the table sat the woman, not in the simple clothes from the night before, no hastily wrapped gray hair, no small house, no warm yellow light, no old wooden table. She was dressed in something elegant and composed, carrying the kind of calm only people who have spent years in positions of authority possess. The face was the same, the wrinkles, the deep eyes, the steady gaze. But now, it was no longer the face of a mother. It was the face of someone who held the power to decide. Chioma froze in the doorway. For 1 second, she did not breathe. For 2 seconds, she did not understand. By the third, the truth hit her head on. The woman she had spat on the night before was the very person sitting in the highest seat in this room. No one spoke right away, but everyone looked at Chioma, not with curiosity, but with expectation, as if they knew something she still had not fully accepted. Chioma felt her throat go dry. Her hand tightened around her folder until her fingers turned white. Her perfect smile, Vanished. No time to hold it. No time to fix it. No time to pretend. You rehear, the woman said. Her voice was calm. Not loud. Not cold. But each word landed so clearly that no one in the room could ignore it. Chioma did not know how she managed to walk inside. Her legs moved on reflex, but her mind remained frozen where she stood. Every calculation, every plan, every bit of confidence shattered. She sat down in the chair across from them. She no longer felt like she was stepping into the opportunity of a lifetime. It felt more like she was stepping into a trial. One of the panel members opened her file. Chioma, he said in a neutral tone, your resume is very impressive. She barely heard the rest, because every other sound was drowned out by the one truth screaming inside her head. There was no such thing as everything is still under control. There was no just a small mistake. There was no she has no power to affect my future. She had walked straight into the very room where the consequences of her actions were already waiting for her. Chioma looked up. Her eyes met the eyes of the woman at the head of the table. There was no longer the distance of a dinner table. No longer the imbalance between youth and age. Only two people remained. One who had committed an unforgivable act, and one who now held all the power to decide what would happen next. The mother no. The leader looked at her. Not with anger. Not with mockery. Not with loud revenge. Just with a gaze deep enough to make Chioma understand that everything had been seen, clearly, fully, without a single detail missed. Shall we begin? She said. A simple question. But in that moment, it carried the weight of a sentence, waiting to be delivered. Chioma opened her mouth. No sound came out. She inhaled, tried to speak, but the voice that had always been smooth, sharp, confident, for the first time in her life, trembled, because for the first time, she was no longer the one in control. She was the one facing the consequences. And the most terrifying thing was not what the woman might do. It was how calm she was, so calm that without doing anything at all, she was already enough to make Chioma's entire world collapse. The conference room on the 12th floor was completely silent. Not a single rustle of paper. Not a single chair shifting. No one on the panel spoke to rescue. The atmosphere that had thickened around Chioma, like an invisible net, tightening until even breathing became difficult. She sat there, her back straight, but her hands beneath the table had gone ice cold. The file in front of her suddenly felt as heavy as stone. Her degrees, her achievements, the carefully polished work history, everything she had spent years believing was enough to swing open. Any door now lay motionless, powerless, almost ridiculous in the face of one simple truth she had never truly learned. Skill can bring a person to the door of opportunity, but character determines whether that person deserves to walk through it. The woman at the head of the table, Adwale, smothered, did not let much emotion show on her face. That was what terrified Chioma the most. If she had been angry, if she had raised her voice, if she had exposed her right there in the room with the outrage, she had every right to show the night before. Chioma might still have known how to defend herself. She could have cried. She could have apologized. She could have blamed a moment of lost control, pressure, misunderstanding, any of the cheap excuses people use to wrap up their true nature in nicer words. But the woman gave her no such escape. She simply sat perfectly straight, one hand resting on Chioma's file, her calm gaze colder than any burst of anger. One panel member cleared his throat softly, as if waiting for her to begin the interview in the usual way. The first question, the introduction, the polite discussion about work experience, career vision, leadership, adaptability. A procedural door was still technically open, but only in form, because the person deciding the fate of that morning had already seen what lay beyond the resume. She had seen the real person. The mother lowered her eyes. She opened the file. Each page turned with only the faintest sound. But to Chioma it felt like the ticking of a clock counting down to an unavoidable moment. With every page, another layer of hope was peeled from her hands. Every line about achievements, projects, Certifications, things that had once made her proud now seemed small, fragile, almost meaningless. Chioma tried to swallow the panic rising inside her. "Mayam," she said. Her voice was dry, low, nothing like the smooth, confident tone she had always used to win people over. The woman looked up, said nothing, only looked at her, and that look killed the rest of Chioma's sentence before it could leave her lips. Not one explanation, not one opportunity. Not because the woman did not want to hear it, but because some things are already so clear that any explanation only becomes another insult to the truth. Chioma understood that, understood it too well. The night before, in that small house, she had not given a mother the chance to keep her dignity through even the smallest courtesy. She had not given her the chance to simply be treated as a human being worthy of respect. She had turned the entire dinner into a stage for her own cruelty. And now, life was simply returning to her exactly what she had given. No shouting, no humiliation in return, no loud revenge, just a door quietly closing. The mother looked down at the file one last time. Then she stopped. The movement was small, but the entire room seemed to hold its breath with her. She closed the file. The sound of the cover meeting itself was soft, very soft. But to Chioma, it sounded like the final bridge being cut. Then she set the file down on the table. She did not throw it, did not push it away, did not make any dramatic gesture. She simply placed it down gently, the way someone with real power does not need force to decide another person's fate. Then she spoke. "We do not hire people who do not know how to respect others." The sentence was not loud, not emphasized, not burdened by a single unnecessary word, and that simplicity made it the most complete sentence of judgment possible. No one in the room objected. No one asked for reconsideration. No one asked another question. Because everyone understood this was no longer about qualifications, no longer about a resume, no longer about impressions or potential. It was about the foundation of a human being, and a person who could spit into the face of an elderly mother in her own home. What would she one day do to coworkers weaker than herself? How would she treat subordinates? How would she use power once she had it? A great company does not only hire skill, it also hires the risk a person brings with them. And in that moment, Chioma was no longer a promising candidate. She was a danger seen too clearly. Chioma felt the blood drain from her body. She opened her mouth again. "Please, please let me explain." It was the weakest sentence she had ever spoken. Gone was the sharpness. Gone was the pride. Gone was the perfectly tailored confidence she had worn that morning when she entered the building believing the world was already in her hands. The mother looked at her. For the first time, there was a flicker of sadness in her eyes. Not sadness for herself, but sadness for a young woman who had traded away her future for arrogance and cruelty. "There are apologies," she said, "that come only after the truth has been exposed. At that point, they are no longer regret. They are only fear of losing what you wanted." Chioma went rigid, because that was the truth. If the woman sitting at the head of the table today had not been Adewale, Smother, this had just been an ordinary interview. With strangers, would she have felt regret? Or would she still be thinking of last night as nothing more than a small outburst that did not really matter? The answer cut through her thoughts like an invisible blade. She was not sorry because she had done something wrong. She was terrified because the wrong thing had come back and torn apart her future, and realizing that hurt more than any rebuke could have. The mother tilted her head slightly toward the door. She did not need to say, "You may leave." She did not need security to escort her out. She did not need any further formality. One small gesture was enough to close everything. The door had closed. Not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. Chioma walked out of the conference room like someone who had just fallen out of her own life. The hallway was still as quiet as it had been when she arrived. The carpet was still thick. The lights were still elegant. Nothing in the building had changed. Only she was no longer the same. The elevator carried her down to the lobby, and she could not even remember pressing the button. Each floor lit up and vanished before her eyes like the steps of a future, slipping out of her hands. When the doors opened, the lobby was still full of people, still polished, still professional, still cold in the way Lego's mornings always were. But now, Chioma no longer felt that she belonged there. She passed the giant glass wall in the lobby. This time, the reflection staring back at her was no longer the confident, victorious woman about to step into a new life. It was a pale face, a pair of eyes barely holding together, a person who had just learned that some doors, once closed, do not open again just because you are beautiful, talented, or know how to say exactly what people want to hear. Outside the building, the Lagos sun still blazed. Cars still rushed past. The city did not stop to grieve for anyone. Her phone vibrated in her bag. Adwale's name lit up on the screen. Her heart lurched. For one brief moment, the most foolish hope flashed through her. Maybe he was calling to hear her explanation. Maybe he just needed time. Maybe everything was not completely over. She answered almost immediately. Adwale. The line was silent for a few seconds. Then his voice came through. Calm, tired, distant. Done T come looking for my mother again. That was all. No yelling. No insults. No demand for explanations. No chance for her to stretch the conversation into something that, in his heart, had already ended the night before. Chioma stood frozen on the crowded sidewalk. Adwale, I and Dun T come looking for me either. The words fell like the final lock sealing shut the second door in a single day. The call ended. The screen went dark. This time, she truly had nothing left. No job. She lost the job. No man who had once been the bridge she meant to cross to get closer to status, security, and the future she wanted. She lost the man. No illusion that she could still reach for a bigger life through a flawless appearance and carefully practiced smiles. She lost the future she had nearly touched. But the deepest pain was not in those three losses. It was in the fact that none of them had been taken from her. She had destroyed them herself. With one brief act. One spit. One moment when she thought she stood above someone else. Only for life, 24 hours later, to knock her down through the very place she had once believed would be her launching ground. And back in the conference room on the 12th floor, the mother remained seated after Chioma left. She did not smile in victory. She did not gloat. She did not feel she had taken revenge. She simply sat in silence for a moment, one hand resting on the closed file, her old eyes weighed down by a deep, weary sadness. Because decent people do not take joy in watching someone collapse. They simply understand that sometimes, if consequences do not speak, evil begins to believe it can keep walking forever without paying a price. Outside, Legos kept moving. In one small house, a mother still held on to her dignity. In one vast city, a man named Adwale had finally seen clearly the woman he once loved. And somewhere, in the rush of the crowd, Chioma kept walking in beautiful heels and perfect clothes, while the world inside her had shattered completely. Because some lessons do not come through advice. They do not come through books. They do not come through things people hear and then forget. They come through loss, through a door closing right in front of you, through the moment you realize that life may stay silent for a long time. But that does not mean it has not been watching, and that is the most frightening truth about consequence. It does not always come immediately, but when it comes to the place that hurts the most. Ending message to hold the viewer. Some people think that if they hide their true nature well enough, they can walk through any door. But they forget one thing. The way you treat those with less power is the truest RAA summy your life will ever present. Your degrees may look impressive. Your appearance may be flawless. Your words may be sweet. But all it takes is one moment for your true nature to speak for itself. And when it does, everything you built on pretense will collapse in silence. If this story touched you, leave a comment and tell me where you're rewatching from. And don't forget to subscribe. Because sometimes a story is not just something to hear. It is something meant to remind us. Never look down on anyone, because you never know when the person you belittle today may be the one holding the door to your future tomorrow.